Hi again. I'm really happy to be here to talk about the power of the individual and, more importantly, the power of the individuals. As time goes on, I think it becomes much more about all of us collectively taking action and moving forward. As individuals, as I just said, and collectively we all have the power to create positive change in the world. Throughout history, it's often been a leader or a small group of leaders that have led others through struggles for independence, the right to vote, the right to own property, the right not to be property, access to education. And when we think about iconic leaders over the last 100 years or so, we think about people like Gandhi, who was instrumental in the anti-colonialist fight for India's independence. We think about Martin Luther King and how instrumental he was in the civil rights movement in the United States. We think about Rachel Carson in the United States, who was instrumental in sparking an entire environmental movement that eventually led to the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States. Now, as we all know, as we've been living through the most recent history, things are different. The power of an individual to lead us through social, political, and cultural changes isn't the same anymore. Now, because of digital tools, access to the internet, access to more information, new organizations, and I also will say companies, have emerged to create a new power of the individual. No longer do we have just one movement with one singular leader at the center, but instead we've got many, many different leaders in distributed patterns. Our struggles to make change are often started by many people online and then move offline, as I was mentioning this morning, and then go back online again and start to spread. Fighting for political freedoms and independence now look a lot more like this. Instead of Martin Luther King, we now have Black Lives Matter, a hashtag that started online with the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin murder case, and has grown to have 23 chapters in the United States and has held over 700 events. Instead of Rachel Carson, we have the Climate March, where 300,000 people gathered in New York City in September, and 150 countries had other gatherings that also collected 150,000 people. So what does this all mean? Now we're able to create a new power, not only of the individual at the center, but many individuals spread around. Leaders can emerge much more freely. So what's our role as individuals in this room? It's our role to create, facilitate, support, and invest in organizations, companies, movements, and most importantly in each other, that can harness and distribute power to help empower and shape both old organizations and new organizations so that there are many of us who are empowered to lead. A friend of mine sent this to me last weekend, and I thought that I wanted to put it in here because I thought that the numbers in here were really interesting in talking about the power of the individual. So this is taken from David McCandless, who does infographics, who was taking some of Clay Shirky's research on the internet. And if you see in that little square on the bottom, it says this is 100 million hours that it took to create Wikipedia. So this was made in 2010, and Wikipedia was founded, it was over a 9-year period. So Wikipedia was started in 2001. So there's been many more hours put into it. However, every year Americans watch 200 billion hours of TV, just in the United States alone. And someone else told me last week that just this year significantly, media consumption has jumped in the United States from 12 hours a day per screen time, 12 hours a day per American to 14 and a half, because people are on their phone and their computer, and right, so there's a very significant jump. Now we're spending more time in front of screens than we are doing anything else. So what if we as individuals and as groups and the organizations that we're with could harness some of that cognitive surplus, as Clay Shirky calls it, so that we can help activate people and give people tools and ways that they can start acting on their own, and encourage people to say, hey, I have an idea and I can do something about it, because either I can figure out how to get a group of people together, or I can use a digital tool, or I can use social media, or I can meet with people and start something. It's very powerful. So, what am I doing with this information that I just shared with you? Michael Green this morning, if you were here this morning, was talking about the work that he's doing, and then I took some data from something called the Equality Trust, which is done by a researcher named Richard Wilkinson, and looked at, with a little bit of a finer point than what Michael was talking about this morning, was to not just look at GDP, but to look at income inequality in different countries. And what you'll see, and then these social problems are things like imprisonment, teenage pregnancy, access to nutrition, social mobility, literacy, life expectancy, etc. And what you found is kind of similar to what Michael found, like Scandinavia is on the bottom left, sort of where you would expect things to be. And as you move across, you see a lot of Europe, and you don't see the country where I'm from, which is the United States. So we are actually literally off the chart. So things in the United States are getting worse. The 99 versus 1% issue continues to grow, and it actually is just creating more of these social problems to increase, kind of regardless of what happens with our GDP. So, a small group of us have gotten together to create a not-for-profit organization called Just Capital. It's a place where we're in the process of collecting, and then we will widely share new market information. So what we're doing right now is we will, by the end of the next month, we will have polled 38,000 people in the United States and basically ask them, how is your economic and financial system failing you, and what do you value in corporate behavior? So just echoing to Prince Liechtenstein's speech before, where he was talking about this unending, unrelenting focus on quarterly earnings. And so we're seeing that sort of drive a lot of decision making, obviously not just in the United States, but in Europe and other places too, and what kinds of social problems that's actually starting to create through that. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we're going. We just started in February, so we're still in the early days. But the plan is basically that we will provide all of this information to the public, free and accessible for people who want to understand it. And then also, we will then create a weighting system where we will rank all of the values that come back to us in a very customized ways, so that people can define, and then rank the 1,000 biggest publicly traded companies. So people can look kind of, ultimately, this is what America values as just corporate behavior. And then there's also ways to customize it where people can say, you know, my core values are sustainability, or my core values are worker benefits. And then you can sort of look at what companies you want to either invest in, buy from, and even work for too. So, just to end with, what are people saying? I've been so amazingly heartened by this information, because while we think everyone is so different and everyone has their sort of quirks and the things that make them special and their issue that they really care about, is that the research that's coming back from from polling people is that actually everyone cares about the same thing, that there is this amazing universality to what we all want. As consumers, we want to pay fair prices for things, which is not the lowest price, which was really interesting conversations to have with individuals, that people, when they have an understanding or an awareness that, you know, something's been made with potentially slave labor or not sustainably sourced, that there's an awareness of that. So people want to pay fair prices for what they're getting. Employees, all of us who work, we want to have fair wages, we want to get benefits provided to us, and we want education and training. So again, just basic universal things that we probably all want. And when corporations are in communities, people want the company to plan with the community on new projects and endeavors, and respect the local identity of where they have landed. In terms of investors, government, and society, being accountable for mistakes and making sure that corporations are paying taxes has come up as a big issue. Environmentally, I think there's something, while we've been finding that people don't really think they care about the environment, they very much care about the environment when it's about their local environment. So if it's a lake that goes away, or you know, there's a spill of something right where they live, they actually care a lot about the environment. And I think what's also heartening to hear from people is that it's time to just go beyond recycling, because everybody does that and it's almost become just rote now. And then in terms of market behavior, that people really want companies to act ethically with their trading partners and business partners, and then to be accountable. So with that, I will introduce someone who's very invested in investing, Suzanne Biegel, and we're going to just chat for a few minutes together.
Okay.